Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week so you can kind of put together the dots to be able to prepare for the upcoming crisis. This week we have Russia cutting off the gas to Germany, which is the fourth largest economy in the world. Another food processing plant burns down. That's over 100 now within the last year. And even 40% of China's economy now starting to collapse and inflation continuing to rise. Let's get started. Not a lot of news this week that's very different from other weeks. For the most part, everybody worried about the interest rate situation. Obviously, the United States Central Bank said that they're going to continue to increase aggressively the interest rates, even if it affects the economy, meaning that we're probably walking into an economic crisis, especially a recession. Now the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, which, keep that in mind, the Eurozone as a whole, even though it's not a country by itself, the European economy under the Euro is the second largest economy in the world. So now their central bank is saying even that they're going to pursue aggressive interest rate increases, which obviously is going to affect their economy. So now we have the first and second largest economies in the world with a significant downward coming, obviously, right? Because if we have the central banks that are continuing to push their interest rates up, that affects the growth, that affects your credit card debt, loans, mortgages, everything. And even China, very bad news from the real estate sector, which is roughly 40% of their entire economy as well. So things are great. Just remember always that even though I talk a lot about the negative things that are coming, because I think that's kind of the reality, right? A lot of you guys that have been following me for 10, 15 years, especially you guys from DTA, we've been kind of talking about this coming now. Remember that even though it's really bad news, there's huge opportunity when it comes to bad news as well. Remember that during the Great Depression in 1929, and in the 30s, obviously, there was more millionaires created at that point in history than at any other point in the history of the world. So things are going to be bad, but obviously there's always opportunity in a crisis. You just keep that in mind. United States market, mostly negative in addition to Canada, 3-4%. European markets are mostly mixed outside of Russia, which went up almost 9%. They're doing great, by the way. Latin American markets, mostly, I want to say negative outside of Santiago, Chile, which was the only positive one. Africa and the Middle East, mostly negative, with South Africa taking the crown for the most negative there. And then in the far, far east, we have Taiwan, which is most negative of all, over 4%. Remember, I still think China is going to go after them within this administration. Bitcoin and crypto news. The NFT volume, for those of you that thought that a picture on a computer of a monkey with a chain around its neck was worth millions of dollars, the NFT volume on OpenSea was the company, the primary biggest market share that, sold all these NFTs. Their volume is down 99%. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the bubble won't come back again, because obviously once the crypto winter stops and it starts coming up again, that'll probably start activating as well. Singapore is weighing more measures to make it more difficult for retail investors to trade cryptos. They're going to do some restrictions, like including customer suitability tests and reducing use of leverage and credit facilities for cryptos. But remember, it can't be regulated. Remember, don't forget. That's what they said, right? Bitcoin overall for the week is down 1.72%. It went down under 20,000 again. In commodities, another poultry processing plant catches fire in Montebello, California. Now, in 2021, I didn't put the list together. I found it. If you guys want to Google it, or if you want to, this doesn't come up very well on Google, let's say. So if you want to use a different search engine, there's one called Free Spoke, which will appear a lot more articles that don't appear on Google that are censored. And then there's another one called Start Page. So in 2021, there were 10 that, quote unquote, accidentally caught on fire. I got my button here ready. And in the last year alone, there's been over 100 that have, quote unquote, accidentally burned down. There was even 2. In any year, there haven't been more than 10. Like not even more than 5. But now all of a sudden, there's more than 100. Now, remember, there are no conspiracies. But there are no coincidences either. The biggest a-hole in the world, Bill Gates, remember, is the largest landowner now in the United States, especially agricultural land. Remember, he's such an amazing businessman that right before the pandemic, he bought into the vaccine companies. What a brilliant businessman. And now that we're having over 100 food processing plants burned down, he's the largest landowner of agricultural land in the United States. It's just a conspiracy. It's all above our heads. Nord Stream 1 gas pipeline has been officially shut down. If I have my numbers correctly, Germany being, not including the Eurozone, is the fourth largest economy in the world. And don't quote me on these numbers because I can't remember exactly, but their $2 trillion economy relies on, it might be 3 trillion, but their trillions of dollars in economy in Germany literally counts on $20 billion worth of gas from Russia. Might be 200, but you guys get my drift. That has been officially shut down because of quote unquote maintenance and an oil leak. Now, there's been such a rise in the energy prices in places like Europe, Germany, and also London that now we even have steel plants that are just literally shutting down and cutting back. If you guys remember, there were some aluminum plants as well that have literally already shut down because it's super, super energy intensive. So now this is going to think about the supply chain, right? Where it comes to not only you going to a cafe and buying a drink because they have to pay electricity, but even the stuff that you buy. Cars are made out of aluminum. For example, Boeing airplanes, Airbus airplanes, all that's aluminum, right? So this is causing a huge ripple effect throughout the entire economy. And that's why I believe that inflation is still going to get worse, not going to get better. There's been an exorbitant rise in energy prices, as I just mentioned. I mentioned to you guys the top steel maker in Europe is forcing to close plants. In Germany is incredible how efficient they are because if I'm not mistaken, they are the third largest exporter in the world after the United States and China. So 1 in 6 industrial companies in Germany is being forced to reduce their production because of the high energy prices. Again, the supply chains, all the materials, that affects all of our lives. A cafe that was charged nearly $10,000 a year in electricity now is paying in 73 days, in other words, 2 months. I messed that up quite a bit. Let me start that over. There was a cafe that was being charged $10,000 for only 73 days of energy. And in Leicester, England, there's a small cafe that was paying $12,000 a year for electricity that now is paying $64,000 a year. So now there's a 433 price increase in what this small cafe pays in electricity. Imagine what the products are going to have to be in order for them to cover that 433% increase in electricity. You guys see, this is why I always do these videos, right? So you guys can kind of see I always tell you guys, don't pay attention to what they say because all those bureaucrats on CNBC and all the financial companies are all in it together. Pay attention to what they do. So we were talking already in 2020 about the possible food shortages. Now there might even be problems producing food because of the electricity, in addition to things like all the materials and things. The UK is also announcing an 80% hike on gas and electric bills before the winter. I mean, this is just, everything is just, imagine when the winter comes, right? This is the summer right now in Europe. Imagine when they need the energy to heat their homes. Germany has agreed to take a 30% stake in their Uniper, which is Germany's largest importer of Russian gas. They've already requested more cash for a bailout. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. And France, there was the one bright place of Europe's energy, was France, because they had the ones that had the nuclear energy. They provided before about 15% of Europe's energy at one time, but now that their energy production of nuclear is at a 30-year low, for the first time since records began in 2012, they're going to be a energy importer, not exporter. So everything literally is going wrong. And in my opinion, they're doing it on purpose to start the new world order, where you're gonna own nothing and be happy. Aren't you excited? All right, last button. Last conspiracy theory button. The Gazprom and Russia, I think this is so ironic because they're trying to quote unquote blame Russia for everything that's happening, and they're trying to cause problems for Russia. Meanwhile, Gazprom, which is the state-owned the oil and gas company in Russia, has had record profits for the first half of 2022. They're even reselling Russian gas. Europe is buying resold Russian gas from China because of the quote unquote sanctions. You see how this is just all ridiculous? And just remember, I think all governments are bad, but the situation in Ukraine really could have been avoided because in my view, the United States, NATO were the ones that were instigating that with Russia. All we had to do was just not go in and do all that stuff in Russia, and they would have never invaded, right? But, gotta feed those military companies. U.S. crude and Brent both went down by a significant amount. The U.S. crude was down over 7%, while Brent was down 8.5%. This has to do with the situation where if central banks are going to start aggressively or continuing to aggressively increase the interest rates, it's going to affect the economy. The economy isn't going to grow as much. And if we have a recession, the demand for oil is going to go down. In addition to that, we have some unrest in Iraq, which failed to dent the nation's crude exports. But obviously, there's the fear that there's going to be a problem there as well. Gold is down 1.57% to 1,713. Silver is down 4.79% to 1,815. And in financial and banking news, the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, a policymaker named Matis Mueller, is saying that the ECB should consider a 75-point rate hike in September to battle the high inflation. And again, as I told you guys in the beginning of the video, the ECB is reaffirming that it must act more aggressively, even if it means dragging the economy of the member states into a recession, or as what I very kindly call the next economic crisis, more like it. And remember, there's opportunity. So don't get bogged down about what's coming, because obviously the opportunity is going to be there. Otherwise, during the Depression in 1929, they wouldn't have recruited any millionaires. Euro inflation hit another record high of 9.1%, much higher than the ECB target of 2%. German inflation rose to the highest level in the last 50 years at 8.8%. The borrowing cost set at the end of August is also seeing its biggest surge in 30 years. So now a lot of investors and consumers are starting to get to the point where they realize this is here to stay. Hungary's central bank raised by 100 basis points to 11.75. The IMF announced another predatory loan deal with another third world country in Sri Lanka at $2.9 billion to support the collapsing economy that they created after all these curbs and everything because of gotta save the environment. British sterling is falling fast against the dollar. This was something that was considered almost impossible. But now, because of all their economic problems, the dollar is literally hitting a 20-year high. The US dollar index, which is basically an index that tracks the dollar against every other major currencies. I think this is going to see one last big surge, and then that's going to be the end. After that, we're going to see, I think, the collapse without the recovery anymore. They hit a 24-year peak, the US dollar against the yen as well. And obviously, this is because even though the U.S. economy isn't doing well, all the other economies aren't doing well. And the U.S. dollar is the least dirty shirt in the closet, essentially. There's a report that showed that a number of Americans filing for new unemployment claims declined further last week. This is consistent with the strong demand for workers. And again, another thing that the central bank of the United States is pointing to say, well, the economy isn't doing that bad, so we continue to be aggressive with the interest rate hikes. And Goldman Sachs, which is the most important bank, the most important financial entity, not only in the United States, but I would say the world, is warning that the UK inflation can soar up to 22% in 2023 if the energy prices continue on an upward spiral. So this is why I do these videos, so you can connect the dots. Remember that they're raising the energy by 80% in the fall. So how is inflation only going to be 22% when they're raising the energy cost by 80%? They're already raising it by 80%. You see how they manipulate the numbers? In economic news, China's housing volume sales are down by 30%. Remember that the real estate in China is about 40% of the economy. That means a hit for the second largest economy in the world. If you include, remember, Europe as a whole, Europe would be second, China would be third. And here at the end of the video, I'm also going to share with you how analysts now are changing their mind, how China may not eclipse the US economy after all. But that housing market in China, which is 40% of the economy, can affect the GDP by 3 points. And Country Garden Holdings, which is the largest property developer in China, their net income for the first half of 2022 went down by 96%, which is its most since its listing in the Hong Kong stock market in 2007. Their unaudited net profit went down to $88 million from billions. So they're not doing well at all. The real estate market in the U.S., which is roughly about 17% of the size of the economy in the U.S., showed its second lowest closings on the MLS since reporting. The first is in July 2007. And then India, which is now Asia's third largest economy, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the sixth largest in the world. They had strong double-digit growth in quarter two at 15.2%, even though now it's going to start to expect to come down quite a bit. According to the PMI, which is the manufacturing index, the one in Europe and also China contracted for 2 months in a row. So another red flags about the economy. And the job growth slowed slightly in August in the U.S. They added just 350,000 jobs last month compared to 528,000 in July, with the unemployment rate rising to 3.7% instead of 3.5%. Remember, that doesn't look for all the people that stopped looking for jobs, which is essentially the participation. I mean, all these numbers are rigged. It's like we talk about them like they mean something, but in reality, corporate news, OnlyFans created earned $3.9 billion in 2021, which is 150% higher year over year. So get on that OnlyFans game. And Honda Motor and LG Energy Solution are going to combine to create a battery plant, which is $4.4 billion in the United States. Both of the stocks went up on the news. Generac, which is the company that has gone up quite a bit because of the sale of the backup generators, they went up 5.72% after their subsidiary was chosen by Virginia, the Dominion Energy Virginia, to be able to modernize its electric grid. And BYD, which is the largest electric company in the world, superseding Tesla, went down by 12% after Warren Buffett sold 1.3 million shares of the company. He still owns 19.92%, but their net income did go up, tripling from a year ago to $521 million. NVIDIA, the huge tech company that makes a lot of chips, it was hit with restrictions by the U.S. government to export AI chips to China and Russia. So their stock is down over 52% this year so far. They're going to have a potential hit of $400 million by not being able to sell it to China or restricting those sales. And CVS Health Corp is in advanced talks to buy Signify Health for about $8 billion. All of these companies are getting to the healthcare game because obviously that's where the money is. Technology, WhatsApp banned 2.39 million Indian accounts in July, which is the highest so far this year. The stricter IT laws in India make it a requirement for WhatsApp to report that information every month. And SpaceX, which is launching a ton of satellites to be able to go ahead and create the Starlink internet service via satellite, is launching a satellite every 5 days into orbit. They even launched their first contract with a cruise company. I believe it was Caribbean, the name of the company, the cruise lines, which is actually going to put their internet, blazing fast internet, which Elon Musk said, kick-ass internet for the first time on the cruise ships. Investment news, Denmark is increasing its offshore wind in the Baltic Sea to 3 gigawatts to be able to go ahead and connect it to the German grid. Again, more plans to be able to try to get off Russian gas. And international events, the Pakistani government is appealing for international help after 1/3 of the country is being inundated because of the heavy monsoons and also supposedly the glaciers that are melting. To give you a relative size, it's literally the size of Britain that's underwater right now in Pakistan. And supposedly, this is the area, there's a tectonic plate which is essentially pushing, that's where the Himalayas come from, for example, where that whole area, for example, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, when the upcoming problems start, that's supposedly going to be underwater. Argentina Vice President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner narrowly avoided an assassination attempt after a supposed Brazilian pointed a gun at her face, pulled the trigger, and it didn't go off. There was a problem with that. I think that's another. I said I was going to hit the button again, but I think that's just a planned show. She's under court for corruption. She might go to jail for 12 years. And conveniently, a Brazilian, which we've never heard a Brazilian ever doing a terrorist act, all of a sudden, I mean, come on. Anyway, and in unusual facts this week, conspiracy theory, the preppers are right. Indian billionaire Gautam Adani, the first Asian man to crack the top 3 richest man in the world with a worth of $137 billion. He's only after Elon Musk, which is worth $251 billion, and Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, at $135 billion. He passed Bernard Arnault, which is the luxury goods magnate Louis Vuitton and all those things from France. And until recently, many economists have assumed that China's GDP was most likely to surpass the US by the end of the decade. But now, due to a sharp slowdown in China's growth in the past year, they're now prompting a lot of analysts to reconsider when and if China's economy will actually surpass that of the United States. They also have a mind-blowing population crisis. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave all your questions with hashtag AskMarcello. And don't forget, the preppers were right.